a lot of what I work on with caregivers when I'm talking to them is trying in whatever way possible to increase the compassion for that person with dementia. Because there's so much on the caregiver side. It's, oh, they won't sleep. They're following me around everywhere. I can't get a break. They're constantly accusing me of something, or there's all of that stress. But just imagine what is going on in this person's brain. Like, how are they viewing the world? How might they be perceiving this situation? So much is being taken away. They might not understand what's going on, even though we are saying something very clearly. They might not be receiving that in the same way. And oftentimes they aren't. So the more we can share how that brain is changing and increase the compassion, I do think family members and caregivers can show up differently, realizing they are not intentionally trying to make life miserable for us. They are not intentionally trying to make things horrible for us. How frightening it must be to live in this world where you think people are trying to either hurt you or take away your basic rights. I sometimes tell the caregivers I work with, imagine somebody you didn't like at all. And that person came up to you right now and tried to undress you or toilet you or bathe you. Would you want to take it from them? Probably not. So it's the compassion piece, but also what I think is super important is, yes, you absolutely can revive and rebuild the quality of the relationship between the main caregiver and the person with dementia. Because the more tension and strain and just negative interactions the person with dementia has with their main caregiver, the less likely that person with dementia is going to want to accept that caregiver's help. So we want to try to do what we can to make sure we're fitting in time to build that relationship with the person with dementia, have good interactions so that when it comes time for some of those absolute hands-on care tasks, or times when you really do need to step in and help them with things, they will be more likely to receive it.
What are the most common challenges faced by family members caring for loved ones with dementia or other problems, but especially with dementia, because dementia is not often just cognitive, but also physical and all of that stuff as well?
I think in particular about dementia caregivers, the research shows they tend to have higher rates of the physical burden, higher rates of depression. The Alzheimer's Association reported 72% of dementia caregivers in particular feel a sense of relief when their loved one passes. And caring for somebody with dementia tends to last for a longer time than some other conditions. So I do think there's differences between the types of caregivers. But in terms of challenges, specifically with sandwich caregivers, where they're raising kids, but they're also caring for parents, these tend to be people who are probably at a prime in their career or at a point in their life where they're really trying to build financial stability and set themselves up for the future. Yet here they are trying to juggle not only raising their family, but caring for a sick parent. And the financial toll of caregiving, especially dementia caregiving, is so hard. But I also think about they're going to have to take more days off from work. They might have to take a leave of absence. And to think that doesn't impact their career is naive. I imagine that's probably going to impact potential promotions, projects, how much they can show up and be included on things. The financial toll, both in the short term and the long run, and how it impacts their career is a really big concern for a lot of those caregivers in particular. I also think we can't ignore the strain it could put on a marriage too, especially if both partners are not maybe in agreement with how much time or energy or focus is given to caring for the aging parent.
A recent study that was done, and it was a pretty robust study, 53% actually said that their health was declining because of the situation. With these staggering numbers, how can caregivers manage their emotion, their physical health? How do you do it?
What you're saying is so incredibly important. And there's just this domino effect or the snowball effect, because the more depressed a caregiver is, the less likely they're going to be able to respond to the challenges of caregiving, especially if there are behavioral concerns in their loved one. We've got to do something to change. As soon as we look at ourselves and we figure out, okay, what can I do to help myself? What can I do to lower the stress, sleep better, eat better, exercise? I really rely a lot on cognitive behavioral therapy principles. So really focusing on what we think is incredibly important. And if you're going into this and thinking nothing is ever going to get better until my caregiving journey is over, this is going to be the hardest caregiving journey ever. And you're going to come out with those really negative health outcomes. So it's a matter of how can I do this in the best way possible that supports myself, supports my family, and supports my loved one. It's never going to look ideal or perfect, but we have a lot more control over directing this caregiving journey the way that we want. You can show up in a way that you feel good about, and you can still experience moments of joy with your loved one and still be there for other areas of your life. So I like to work specifically with teaching some of those basic cognitive behavioral therapy principles and helping them realize every single thought you are having about your loved one, about your partner, about your spouse, about the community, the healthcare providers, all of that is having an impact in how you're showing up to caregiving, how you're feeling. And that is ultimately going to impact your loved one with dementia. So if we can focus on you and help you, I always say great dementia care cannot ignore the caregiver. We have to address the caregiver and their health and their well-being. And the more we do that, the better outcomes we're going to have for improving the quality of life for the person with dementia. So that's my focus. Ultimately, I do want to help the person with dementia. That's how I got started, but I'm doing it through the caregiver.
We talked about self-care, the same thing that you see in airplanes where they say that if the oxygen drops, first your own face, then everybody else, because if you're out, then you can't help anybody else. And some of the self-care, as we talked about, exercise does so many things. It checks so many boxes. About 45% of people say that they don't exercise anymore. 55% say that they haven't taken a vacation in 2 years. These are the caregivers. What is your approach to giving people tools to focus on themselves? Because there's also guilt element in that.
There's so much guilt wrapped up in caregiving for so many things. But when we look at guilt in particular for exercise, I think if we talk about changing thoughts, that really comes in, we have to start reframing how we view caring for ourselves. Caring for ourselves is not just for ourselves. Sometimes I like to refer to self-care as a life care. It's caring for life, your life and your loved one's life and your family's life. The healthier you are, the better you can be for you and showing up for everybody else. It doesn't have to be a marathon, but it has to start with you just knowing and believing and deciding, I can start to get more active. I can start to be healthy. It's okay if it's at home, if it's starting with chair yoga, if it's using the YouTube video. There's so many resources at our disposal that we can use to start increasing our physical activity. And I know there are challenges, especially if you're caring for somebody with dementia who maybe isn't as physically able. So maybe you have to push them in a wheelchair as you go for a walk around the neighborhood. Or maybe you have to do the super uncomfortable thing and ask your neighbor to come sit or watch so you can do something. Like there's lots of ways to get more active and have exercise in our lives. And this is so important for dementia caregivers in particular, because pretty much every dementia caregiver I talk to is worried about developing dementia themselves. And we know how important exercise is to lowering their risk. I think it's a matter of just coming up with ways to make this realistically happen, being okay with how it looks, and maybe even letting other people know your goals, having them support you, having them check in with you. And then when we fall off, which is going to happen, people are going to get sick, there's going to be hospitalizations, just realize we could just pick back up at any old time. Just because we have maybe failed in the past, which I don't like to use that, but things didn't work out a certain way in the past, it doesn't mean we can't make it more successful in the future. There's always hope for trying again and doing it again. We can't ignore our feelings. We're human. We're going to have hardships. We're going to have emotional pain. I think that's part of the human existence. A lot of people like to focus, how do I feel better? How do I feel better? And that's great. We certainly focus on that. But I think an equally important thing is to focus on how to actually feel bad in a way that doesn't make things worse. If we can get more comfortable feeling uncomfortable, if we can have more of an understanding that the human existence has this emotional pain, and when you're caring for a loved one with dementia, it's almost silly to think we are not going to feel emotional pain. We're watching somebody we love decline in front of our eyes. We're dealing with real life situations day in and day out. And so a lot of what we do is helping caregivers feel that unease, recognize nothing terrible, horrible has gone wrong. How do we feel it? How do we recognize it's happening? How do we just sit with this, get familiar with it, and know that every single time that has ever happened to you, you have gone through it. And so just acknowledging we can't have the good, we can't have the happiness and the joy and amazing experiences without also the opposite of it, because that's the only way we actually know what good is. So I'm really grateful you said that, because a lot of times when people hear about changing our thoughts and cognitive behavioral therapy, they think it's ignoring this emotional piece, but it's not. It's how do we make room for all of the emotional piece, because it's impossible to only have the good side. There's going to be both. And that's true whether you're a caregiver or not.